Close your eyes for a second. Can you still hear it? That static hum of Saturday morning cartoons. The crunch of frosted cereal between your teeth. The smell of fresh-cut grass mixed with chlorine from the neighbor's pool. If you grew up in the 1980s, you didn't just live through a decade. You lived through magic. And somewhere deep inside, part of you never really left. Let me take you back. You woke up before your parents on Saturday. Tiptoed down the hallway in your footy pajamas, careful not to wake anyone. Because from 7 to noon, the television belonged to you. Thundercats, G.I. Joe, He-Man, the Smurfs. You sat cross-legged on shag carpet, eyes glued to the screen, a mixing bowl full of Captain Crunch balanced on your lap. The sugar rush hit you before the first commercial break. And those commercials? They weren't interruptions. They were wish lists. Action figures, race car tracks, Cabbage Patch Kids. You memorized every jingle, every tagline, every promise of happiness wrapped in plastic and cardboard. Nobody bothered you during cartoon time. That was the rule. Your quiet, sacred time in a house that would soon wake up to chaos. Blockbuster opened its doors in 1985, and suddenly Friday night had a ritual. Your family piled into the station wagon, drove to the bright blue and yellow building on the corner, and walked into rows and rows of VHS tapes. New releases sat on the front wall, and if you were lucky, the one you wanted wasn't already checked out. You grabbed it, maybe snagged a box of Milk Duds from the candy rack, and headed home. If the last person didn't rewind the tape, you groaned, hit rewind, and waited. Because you didn't just watch movies back then. You earned them. Summer vacation meant one thing: road trip. You packed the car until the trunk wouldn't close. Suitcases, coolers, beach toys, and at least one pillow that smelled like home. Florida was the dream. Disney World, Daytona Beach, or just some cheap motel with a pool that had a diving board and a vending machine. The drive took forever. You played license plate bingo, fought over the map, and ate gas station peanuts until someone felt sick. But when you finally saw those palm trees swaying in the distance, it was like crossing into another world. A world where time slowed down and everything tasted like salt water and freedom. In 1983, McDonald's introduced Chicken McNuggets nationwide, and America fell in love. Crispy, bite-sized, dippable. Kids begged for them. Adults pretended they were ordering them for the kids, then stole one to check the temperature. BBQ sauce or honey mustard, it didn't matter. One taste and you were hooked. They weren't just food. They were a cultural moment. Music was something you worked for. You sat by the radio with your finger hovering over the pause button on your tape deck, waiting for your favorite song to play. The DJ always talked too long. And if you mistimed it, you ended up with Casey Kasem yelling over the intro to Take On Me for the 100th time. But when you got it right, when you captured that song perfectly onto your mixtape, you felt like a genius. You labeled the cassette with a ballpoint pen, drew little hearts or lightning bolts on the cover, and guarded it like treasure. Arcades were temples. The second you walked into the mall, you heard it. The electronic symphony of Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, the Laga. Quarters clinked in your pocket like promises. You stood in line for your turn, hands sweaty, heart pounding. High scores were written in light on the screen, and if someone beat yours, you didn't leave. You stayed until you took it back. Respect wasn't given. It was earned 1 quarter at a time. Houses were affordable. A decent 3-bedroom home cost around $80,000. Real wood cabinets, shag carpet, and at least one room. A backyard big enough for a grill and a slip-in slide. You didn't dream of mansions. You dreamed of privacy. A place where you could shut the door, turn up your boombox, and be yourself. And that second bathroom? Pure gold. No more waiting. No more pounding on the door while your sister took an hour to do her hair. The Sears Wish Book arrived every fall like Christmas in print. Hundreds of glossy pages filled with toys, gadgets, bicycles, and dreams. You sat on the floor with a red pen, circling everything you wanted, folding the corners, leaving it casually on the coffee table where your parents would accidentally find it. Half the fun was flipping through it again and again, imagining what it would feel like to open those boxes on Christmas morning. Gas prices finally dropped below $1 in 1986. Stations flipped their signs to 89 cents, and drivers cheered like they'd won the lottery. Attendants still washed your windshield without asking. Every cruise, every joyride, every trip to the beach felt twice as sweet. You could fill up the tank, grab a soda, and still have change left over. Every house had a photo wall. Awkward school pictures with gap-toothed smiles. Glamour shots with soft lighting and way too much hairspray. Your uncle's perm, proudly framed in fake wood. If you stood still too long in the living room, someone might snap a photo and hang you up next. The wall told the story of your family, one embarrassing moment at a time. Kids drank straight from the garden hose. No filters, no warnings about BPA or lead. Just cold, metallic-tasting water that came out in bursts. You lined up after riding bikes around the neighborhood, passed the hose around like a trophy, and nobody thought twice. You survived. You thrived. And somehow, that water tasted better than anything that came from the fridge. The clapper turned your lights into magic. Clap on. Clap off. Every commercial ended with that tagline, sung by a chorus of people who looked way too excited about not using a light switch. You begged your parents to buy one, and when they finally did, it felt futuristic. Until it turned the lights on in the middle of the night because your dog sneezed. The average salary in the 1980s hovered around $17,000. And somehow it stretched. Families bought groceries, paid the mortgage, maybe even saved a little for a rainy day. You didn't need much when fun was $5 and a backyard. A grill, a radio, and your neighbors coming over with potato salad. That was a party. In 1981, MTV launched with the words, "Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll." And just like that, someone turned up the color on America. Music videos became just as important as the songs themselves. Suddenly, it wasn't enough to sound good. You had to look good too. Michael Jackson moonwalked. Madonna rolled around in a wedding dress. Prince wore purple and didn't apologize. MTV didn't just play music. It created icons. Fast food came wrapped in foil, not fancy boxes. Burgers were cheap, salty, and tasted like heaven after baseball practice. Fries came in paper bags. Milkshakes were so thick they bent your straw. And you always left with a few extra ketchup packets stuffed in your pocket, just in case. In 1985, Coca-Cola made one of the biggest mistakes in marketing history. They changed the recipe and launched new Coke. People rioted. Protest lines formed outside grocery stores. Complaint letters piled up at headquarters. Just 3 months later, Coca-Cola caved and brought back the original formula, now called Coke Classic. It was a failure so spectacular, it became beloved. Because America knew what it wanted, and it wasn't afraid to say so. You didn't text your friends at school. You passed notes, folded like origami, written in gel pen, labeled "Read Now" in big letters. You slid them across desks like secret missions. If the teacher caught you, the note went straight into the trash. But if the teacher read it out loud, goodbye, dignity. Hello, permanent embarrassment. In 1985, the Nintendo Entertainment System hit U.S. shelves, and suddenly, Mario wasn't just a plumber. He was a hero. Duck Hunt, The Legend of Zelda, Punch-Out. Games came in gray plastic cartridges that you had to blow into just to make them work. And when they finally did, hours vanished. You sat inches from the TV, eyes burning, fingers cramping, determined to save the princess or beat Mike Tyson, or find that last heart container. Trapper Keepers were status symbols. Loud colors, Velcro flap, matching folders tucked inside. If yours had unicorns or race cars on the cover, you were basically royalty. You flipped it open in class like a briefcase full of secrets. And when that Velcro ripped open, heads turned. Everyone knew you meant business. You recorded TV shows on blank VHS tapes, labeled them with a Sharpie, stacked them by the VCR in crook towers. And if someone taped over your recording, that was grounds for war. Entire shelves were filled with homemade archives. Saturday Night Live episodes, cartoons, movies from HBO. Some of those tapes are probably still in someone's basement, half-labeled and covered in dust. Car interiors smelled like warm vinyl and crayons. You sat on sticky bench seats, rolled the windows down by hand, and burned your legs on metal seat belt buckles in the summer. No airbags, no cup holders. Just you, the road, and your dad saying, "We're not stopping until we get there." In 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded, and the whole country stopped. Millions watched it live on TV, including school kids, because teacher Krista McAuliffe was on board. It was supposed to be inspiring. Instead, it broke hearts. You remember exactly where you were when it happened. The silence in the classroom. The way the teacher turned off the TV. The way the world felt a little less safe after that. In 1981, IBM released its first personal computer. It looked like a boxy little spaceship sitting on your desk. Businesses bought them. Schools experimented with them. Tech guys said it would change everything. Turns out, they were right. But back then, most kids still preferred the arcade. Because no matter how fancy that computer was, it couldn't beat the thrill of Tetris on a Game Boy. In 1984, Apple aired its famous 1984 Super Bowl ad. It only aired once, but it made history. A woman in red sprinted down a gray hallway and hurled a hammer at Big Brother on a giant screen. And boom, the PC world changed forever. It was bold, weird, and totally unforgettable. Steve Jobs didn't just sell a computer. He sold a revolution. Popcorn ceilings were everywhere. Bumpy, textured, oddly satisfying to stare at while lying on the floor. You counted shapes. Flicked Nerf darts up to see if they'd stick. Most of the time, they did. And when you finally moved out of your childhood home, you realized you'd never see a ceiling like that again. You didn't stream your favorite shows. You waited all week. Thursday night meant The Cosby Show, Cheers, Family Ties. If you missed an episode, tough luck. You hoped for a rerun or waited until Monday at school when someone could fill you in. But no spoilers. Because they weren't called that yet. In 1982, E.T. phoned home and broke every box office record. You cried. Your parents cried. Even your big brother cried, though he'd never admit it. Suddenly, Reese's Pieces were cooler than M and Ms., and every kid in America wished they had a glowing finger and a BMX bike. A full grocery trip cost around $60 and fed a family of 4 for the week. Milk was about $2. Bread was under $1. Ground beef ran close to $1.30 a pound. You could still fill a cart without breaking the bank. Coupons helped, sure, but food didn't feel like a luxury. It just fed you. In 1987, The Simpsons debuted as shorts on The Tracy Ullman Show. They weren't polished. Just a weird, squiggly cartoon family. But even then, Bart had attitude. Homer was clueless. And nobody could have guessed they'd become the longest-running TV family in history. In 1986, Top Gun made sunglasses and fighter jets cool again. Tom Cruise played volleyball on the beach. The soundtrack got stuck in your head for years. Everyone suddenly wanted a bomber jacket, a motorcycle, and a wingman. Maverick wasn't just a character. He was a vibe. In 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, and even kids in the U.S. felt it. For years, you'd heard about the Russians in movies, drills, speeches. The Cold War loomed like a shadow. But when that wall came down, brick by brick, it felt like the world exhaled. Reagan's challenge, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," didn't sound like a movie line anymore. It sounded like history. The Ford Escort ruled the road. Small, boxy, reliable, and it came in colors like mustard yellow and seafoam green. Your mom drove one to the store. Your buddy crashed one into a ditch. And if you got one as your first car, you were set. It wasn't fancy, but it got you where you needed to go. In 1983, Microsoft Word launched for the first time. It wasn't flashy, but it let you type, save, and edit without whiteout. Typing a paper without having to redo the whole page felt like witchcraft. And if you had a printer, you were basically a tech wizard. Before GPS, road trips meant fold-out maps the size of your windshield. You fought with your spouse over which exit to take. The glove box was full of old maps from past trips, folded wrong and ripped at the creases. If you made it to your destination without getting lost, it was a miracle. If you didn't, you just called it an adventure. In 1981, Raiders of the Lost Ark hit theaters, and Indiana Jones became every kid's adventure hero. The hat, the whip, the fear of snakes. Harrison Ford made archaeology cool for the first and probably last time in history. You wanted to dig up treasure, outrun boulders, and punch Nazis. And honestly, who wouldn't? In 1984, Tetris was invented in the Soviet Union, but it exploded in the U.S. when Nintendo bundled it with the Game Boy. The blocks fell faster. Your heart raced. You swore that music played in your sleep. And honestly, it still does. You couldn't text your friends. You had a little black address book, a wall calendar, and maybe an answering machine that beeped like a microwave. If someone missed your call, they called back. That was social media. And somehow, it worked just fine. Shopping malls were the teenage kingdom. You didn't go there to buy things. You went to be seen. Walkman clipped to your belt. Orange Julius in hand. A stop at Spencer's Gifts to laugh at lava lamps and questionable T-shirts. It was freedom with air conditioning. It was where life happened. You sent film to get developed and waited. 1 hour photo wasn't everywhere yet. So you dropped off a roll, waited days, and hoped they didn't all come out blurry. When you finally got that envelope of glossy prints, it was like opening treasure. Vacation photos, birthday parties, random moments you'd completely forgotten. Pure gold. Cash ruled the 1980s. If you wanted something, you paid for it in paper, coins, or a handwritten check. You kept your money in a nylon Velcro wallet that made a ripping sound loud enough to silence a room. And somehow, carrying that wallet made you feel rich, even if you only had $5 inside. Every living room had a giant wood-paneled TV. It took 2 people to move it, weighed as much as a refrigerator, and had rabbit ears wrapped in foil for better signal. Sometimes you had to bang the side to make the picture stop jumping. But when it worked, when the image finally cleared, it felt like victory. You wore your favorite band on your T-shirt. Concert tees weren't just clothes. They were identity. AC/DC, Journey, Van Halen. Whatever was on your chest, that was your crew. You ironed them flat, wore them thin, and never threw them out. Ever. Microwaves changed everything. Suddenly, dinner didn't have to take an hour. You could zap a Salisbury steak, nuke a burrito, or reheat last night's coffee. No more waiting on the oven. Just push a few buttons, wait for the ding, and dinner was served. Ronald Reagan was everywhere. Whether you loved him or not, his voice, his hair, his optimism filled the 1980s. He called the Soviet Union the evil empire. He promised morning in America. He made jelly beans seem presidential. His speeches were pure Hollywood, and so was his delivery. For better or worse, he defined the decade. Cabbage Patch Kids caused riots. In 1983, parents literally fought in store aisles to grab the last doll. Each one had a unique name, a chubby face, and a fake birth certificate. It wasn't just a toy. It was proof that you loved your kid enough to elbow strangers in a Toys R Us. School lunch in the 1980s meant rectangular. Pizza, lukewarm milk in a cardboard carton, and maybe a fruit cup with half a peach floating in syrup. You ate it on a plastic tray under fluorescent lights. And somehow, it was still the best part of the day. Every neighborhood had at least one kid whose mom made Kool-Aid in an old Tupperware pitcher. You dumped in the sugar by feel, not by measurement. One sip and your whole mouth turned purple. The walls got sticky. Nobody cared. It was summer in a cup. Gas station maps were free. You walked in, grabbed one from the rack, and asked the clerk which road had the least traffic. No GPS, no apps. Just a creased-up paper guide and some local advice. And if you took a wrong turn, that's how adventures happened. Roller rinks were packed, disco lights, fog machines, endless loops around the wooden floor to Madonna or Foreigner. If you held someone's hand during the slow song, it basically meant you were dating. Bonus points if you didn't fall in front of them. Boomboxes were the soundtrack of the street. Big, loud, slung over your shoulder. They blasted Run DMC, Madonna, Springsteen on cassette. If your batteries died mid-song, you either swapped them out or held a funeral for your street cred. In 1982, Time magazine's Man of the Year wasn't a man at all. It was the computer. That's how big tech had become. Personal computers were showing up in homes, classrooms, offices. And no one could quite figure out what to do with them yet. But everyone knew something was changing. Velcro shoes changed everything for kids. No more bunny ears, loops, or double knots. Just strap and go. Freedom. They made you feel fast, even if you still tripped over your own feet. Laserdisc looked like the future. It was huge, shiny, and promised better quality than VHS. Problem was, it cost too much and barely fit on your shelf. Most folks stuck with tapes. But if your friend had Laserdisc, you knew their dad worked in tech. In 1980, Post-it notes hit the market. Bright yellow squares you could stick on anything. Suddenly, fridges were covered in reminders. Desks were buried in notes. Parents had a new way to say, "Clean your room," without raising their voice. TV commercials were part of the experience. Jingles stuck in your head. Mascots became celebrities. Saturday morning cartoons came with cereal ads that made you beg your parents. There was no skipping. If you wanted to fast forward, you better have recorded it on the VCR. In the 1980s, airline tickets came with real perks. You got a hot meal on a tray, legroom that didn't require yoga, maybe even a free deck of cards. Kids got plastic wings from the pilot. Nobody paid for luggage. Flying felt like an event, not a chore. Home perms were everywhere. Girls' moms, even some dads, ended up with big, fluffy curls that smelled like chemicals for a week. If you had bangs, they were teased straight up with Aquanet until they could block radio signals. Style was loud and proud. Jelly shoes hit playgrounds like neon raindrops. Translucent plastic, glitter inside, and a smell you can still remember. They squeaked. They pinched. After a day in the sun, they nearly melted. But if your feet sparkled purple, you felt like the coolest kid at recess. In 1980, CNN became the first 24-hour news network. Suddenly, news didn't stop after 6 p.m. You could flip it on any time and get updates from around the world. For better or worse, it changed how Americans consumed information and how often they worried. Every kitchen had Tupperware, bright orange, avocado green, mustard yellow. lids that never matched and somehow never fit quite right. Your mom went to Tupperware parties and brought home gadgets you never used, but you still had to find a drawer for them. The Pepsi Challenge started in 1975, but those taste test tables were still everywhere in the 1980s. Malls, fairs, grocery lobbies. You sipped 2 unmarked cups, picked Pepsi, and got a button that said, "I took the challenge." It was marketing judo. And most folks loved the free cola. Your calculator was a brick, rubbery buttons, solar-powered if you were fancy. Teachers let you bring it to math class, but only if you promised not to type 5,318,008 and turn it upside down. Of course, you did it anyway. Socks went over your pants, especially if you were heading to aerobics class. Neon leg warmers, sweatbands, leotards. Thanks to Jane Fonda, exercise became a fashion show. You didn't just work out. You looked like you were about to perform at a synth-pop concert. Choose your own adventure. Books turned reading into risk. 1 page, you're a detective. 5 pages later, you've been eaten by space squids. You kept a finger marking the previous choice. Cheating? Technically. But the multiverse needed you alive. Trivial Pursuit took over every living room. Released in 1981, it was the board game that made you feel smart until the arts and literature category humbled you. Families played for hours, arguing over answers, bending the rules, claiming someone read that card before. Answering machines talked for you. A tiny cassette recorded your missed calls, usually with a robotic voice or your dad saying, "Leave a message after the beep." Some people made custom jingles. You called home just to hear your own voice. In 1980, the Rubik's Cube arrived in the U.S. 6 colors. Endless frustration. You twisted and twisted until you gave up, peeled the stickers off, or claimed you almost had it. Solving one without cheating made you a legend in the school hallway. Everyone used payphones. A quarter got you a local call. Every gas station or street corner had a scratched-up metal box with a dangling cord. If you forgot the number, you flipped through the phone book chained to the booth. And if nobody answered, you just hung up and hoped they'd call you back later. You didn't buy video games. You rented them. 1 cartridge at a time from the corner store or Blockbuster. No saves, no tutorials. You had 48 hours to beat the game or cry trying, and if someone else rented it first, you waited. Like it or not, that Swatch watch didn't just tell time. It told the world who you were. Neon colors, jelly straps. Maybe 2 stacked at once if you were feeling bold. You wore it to the mall, the arcade, to church. And somehow, it always smelled like plastic and strawberry lip gloss. Crimped hair was everywhere. Girls plugged in a heated iron that made zigzag patterns and burned fingertips. If your hair looked like it had been folded like a fan, you nailed it. Add a scrunchy side ponytail and glitter lip gloss. Boom, 1980s fashion icon. Class photos were a whole event. You wore your best sweater, combed your bangs just right, and stood on bleachers while a photographer yelled, "Say cheese." Half the class blinked. Someone made bunny ears. And nobody ever looked at the camera at the same time. Pencils had erasers shaped like ice cream cones or footballs. They didn't erase well, but they smelled like bubble gum and made your pencil case feel exciting. Trading erasers during recess felt more important than anything happening in class. Movie theaters had sticky floors and buttery popcorn. You bought your ticket at a glass booth, picked a seat with no cup holder, and maybe snuck in candy from home. If someone tall sat in front of you, too bad. You leaned sideways the whole film. Polaroid pictures weren't perfect, but they were yours. Click were. Then you flapped that little square like you were casting a spell. A blurry face would fade in, crooked smile and all. No filters, no second takes. Just one shot and a memory that stuck to the fridge for years. You didn't Google song lyrics. You guessed them. In 1984, Ghostbusters took over pop culture. Everyone quoted the movie, drew the logo on notebooks, wanted their own proton pack. If your parents got you the plastic one with the foam blaster, you were the coolest kid on the block. You learned to type on a beige keyboard with no internet. Programs like Mavis Beacon Teaches Typing taught you where the letters were, one painful finger at a time. When you finally hit 30 words per minute, you felt like you could run a company. Your classroom smelled like pencil shavings, chalk dust, and peanut butter sandwiches. The teacher had a giant pull-down map and a globe that squeaked when it spun. And if you got to run the film strip projector, you were basically royalty. Every fridge had alphabet magnets. Kids used them to spell weird messages. Adults used them to post grocery lists. And somehow, at least 3 letters were always missing. Usually Q, Z, and the second E. The pencil sharpener was mounted to the wall. You cranked it like a machine from the 1800s, turning your pencil into a tiny spear. It squealed loud enough to stop class. And half the time, it just ate the pencil instead. Trick-or-treating meant pillowcases full of candy and plastic masks that made you sweat like a furnace. Your breath fogged up the eye holes. But you powered through because that full-size Snickers wasn't going to earn itself. In 1987, Full House hit the air. Corny jokes. Hugs at the end. 3 grown men raising kids in a house that somehow kept getting bigger. Whether you liked it or not, "You got it, dude," became part of everyone's vocabulary. You didn't stream Christmas movies. You waited all year. Rudolph, Frosty, a Charlie Brown Christmas aired once. Miss it? Tough luck. You circled the date in TV Guide, popped popcorn, and watched it with everyone under the same blanket. You drank Tab, even if you didn't like it, the pink can. The weird aftertaste. The sense that you were drinking something futuristic or radioactive. It was diet soda for people who wanted to feel ahead of their time. Or who were just out of Diet Coke. Every kid had a plastic lunchbox with a matching thermos. Scooby-Doo, Transformers, strawberry shortcake. Your lunchbox said everything about you. If you forgot to screw the thermos lid on tight, your soup leaked and your PB&J tasted like tomato by noon. You had to rewind your VHS tapes. If you returned one to the rental store without rewinding, they charged a fee and gave you a dirty look. Be kind, rewind wasn't just a slogan. It was a moral obligation. Stickers covered everything. Your lunchbox, your binder, your closet mirror. Some were fuzzy. Some were glittery. Some said things like rad and totally awesome. If you peeled one off wrong and ruined it, devastating. That was basically vandalism. Mall food courts were weekend destinations. You had your tray of pizza or orange chicken, your friends, and a pile of napkins. After lunch, you hit the arcade or Spencer's Gifts. It wasn't just shopping. It was where life happened. Your school folder had Lisa Frank, or the A-Team, on the cover. Neon dolphins, rainbow tigers. Muscle cars or tough guys with machine guns. There was no in-between. If your folder had a cool cover, you showed it off like a trophy. Back to the Future wasn't just a movie. It was a blueprint. You dreamed of hitting 88 miles per hour in a DeLorean, sipping futuristic Pepsi, and landing somewhere with hoverboards and flying cars. Time travel felt possible, as long as you had plutonium and a mall parking lot. You checked the newspaper for movie times. No apps, no Google. Just a long list of theaters and showtimes in tiny print. You circled the one you wanted, called your friend from the kitchen phone, and hoped someone's mom could drive. You learned to whistle through a blade of grass. One sharp squeal between your thumbs, and suddenly every kid on the playground was trying it. It never worked on the first try, but when it did, you felt like a wizard of sound. The biggest celebrity endorsement was for sneakers. In 1984, Nike signed Michael Jordan, and the Air Jordan era began. By the end of the decade, shoes weren't just shoes. They were status. And if yours were scuffed, you were devastated. You memorized phone numbers, friends, grandparents, pizza delivery. They all lived in your head. If you forgot one, you checked the Rolodex or the back of your address book. Losing that list was like losing your social life. The weather report was a guy with a pointer stick. Green screens weren't fancy yet. Your local weatherman looked like someone's uncle. If he said, "chance of rain," that meant pack an umbrella and sunscreen, just in case. America got a workout right in the living room. You popped in a Jane Fonda VHS, wore spandex tighter than your future, and bounced along to synth music on shag carpet. No gym, no excuses. Just sweatbands, pastel leotards, and a war on calories that smelled like Aqua Net. Sunday nights meant the Disney Sunday movie. You bathed, put on pajamas, and plopped in front of ABC as Tinkerbell lit up the castle. 1 hour of wholesome adventure. Flight of the Navigator. Old Yeller, reruns, then straight to bed. School clothes laid out. Dreams still sparkling with pixie dust. People met through friends, school, or church. No apps, just nerves, guts, and maybe a mixtape. First date? Usually the mall. Maybe a movie. Definitely food court pizza. You didn't split the bill. You saved up for it. And if the night ended with a kiss, you were walking on air. The 1980s weren't perfect. They were messy, loud, and sometimes a little ridiculous. But they were ours. We didn't document every moment. We lived them. We felt them. And somewhere deep inside, we still carry that decade with us. The music, the movies, the taste of cereal milk mornings and chlorine-soaked summers. So if you close your eyes and listen closely, you can still hear it. The hum of the TV, the crunch of gravel under bike tires, the laughter of your friends echoing down the street. That sound? That's home, and it's calling you back. If you want to see 100 forgotten things from the 1950s, just click the video on your screen. Thanks for watching.